Welcome to Aston Means Business, a podcast from Aston Business School. My name's Steve Dyson, and I'm a journalist who's interviewing some of the UK's top business academics every month here at Aston. Today's podcast is all about the future of manufacturing and how it could rely on what's known as servitization. To explore this new concept, I'll be talking to Dr. Ali Bigdeli, a senior lecturer in industrial service innovation in the Advanced Services Group at Aston Business School. Much of Ali's research focuses on how servitization helps manufacturers gain and maintain competitive advantage, expands the scale of their operations directly to the customer and consumers, and increases financial sustainability. Hello to you, Ali.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Ali, what were you doing before Aston and what got you involved in this research?
My research interest has been always around understanding how companies, especially industrial companies, design new business models or innovate their current business models in order to capture and create value for their customers and themselves. So before I joined Aston in 2014, I was part of a research team down in London where we were working on a project looking at how industrial companies providing product service solutions for their customer, and they were mainly in the health sector, and their customers were mainly patients with upper limb disabilities. And it was when we started to realize that the outcome of their company's offerings are much more important than the actual product or services that the companies are providing. And it was when I got much more interested into product service systems and ultimately servitization.
Okay, so you're kind of talking about services rather than just products. So now we're all interested in the future of manufacturing, but this word, servitization, it takes a bit of getting your head around. In its simplest form, what is it?
Yeah, it might not be the most beautiful word, but it certainly has got some interesting meaning. Servitization is a term that is used to explain how manufacturing organizations build their revenue through services rather than products alone. You know, traditionally we've had manufacturing companies who were making things for us versus services companies who were doing things for us. For the past 10, 15, 20 years now, that dynamic started to shift and that boundary started to become blurred. And more manufacturing started to build their competitive strategies around services. Of course, there are different types of services that a manufacturer can provide. Almost all manufacturers provide what we refer to as base services, which are literally warranties and spare parts. Few manufacturers provide what we refer to as intermediate services, which are like trainings, help desks, overhaul, maintenance, and ultimately using digital technologies to provide what we refer to performance advisory services. And ultimately, there are very few manufacturers who are providing what we refer to as advanced services, which are these high-value, quite complicated offerings, which focus on the outcome enabled by the use of the product. So when we talk about servitization, we are more interested in these high-level intermediate services and advanced services.
Okay, well, perhaps you can help us visualize what you're talking about by giving us one or two clear examples of these servitizations by different companies.
Absolutely. So the most iconic example of servitization is Rolls-Royce Power by the Hour. So Rolls-Royce, instead of just selling the gas turbines to their airlines, nowadays they're providing lots of other services. So they put lots of digital technologies and sensors around their engines to be able to help their airlines in their fuel consumption or in helping their operations. And ultimately they're charging their airlines based on the number of hours that they're using their engines. Another example could be like Xerox document management and moving away from just manufacturing and providing the printing machines to their commercial customers to help them in the management of their documents. Another example could be Goodyear Proactive Solution. You know, Goodyear is one of the largest manufacturer of tires in the world. They've now moved away from just selling the tires into helping their commercial users and commercial customers in order to keep their trucks on the roads. So all of these examples are giving you the sense of moving away from this very much product-based thinking and product-based business models into product services and ultimately outcome-based contracts.
And what are the main benefits of servitization?
Yeah, the benefits could be huge. For example, we can talk about it from an economic perspective. For example, most of the companies are going to have recurring kind of revenue. So if you imagine that instead of selling a product on a transactional basis for once, now they are providing lots of services on a long-term contract, and so they have more stable revenues coming in. Of course, lots of the manufacturers in the developed worlds are under huge pressure from low-cost economies, and I believe that servitization advanced services could hugely open up the market and new customers for them. We can also look at it from the strategic point of view, strategic benefits. So as I mentioned, most of these manufacturers are using digital technologies to be able to understand how the products are actually used in the customer's operations and provide lots of intelligence back to the customers. And these are very long-term contracts. So we call it locking customer. So they start a long-term relationship with a customer, and ultimately they're locking out their competitors. And also I can think of some environmental benefits. For years we've been talking about financial sustainability. More and more for the past 4 or 5 years we hear a lot about also environmental sustainability, because by providing these advanced services, they are more able to do resource utilization in terms of manufacturing it, using it, repairing it, reusing it, and ultimately recycling it. So the whole operations become very much circular and become more environmentally friendly.
And servitization, from the sound of it, it sounds like more jobs and more revenue.
Absolutely. It's not just those two things. Sometimes it's bringing more revenue, but as I mentioned, more stable revenue. But at the same time, I think we come to some of the challenges, but also we need more people who can understand services in manufacturing, who got more equipped with manufacturing. Not always it's about adding people to the organization, but sometimes it's just adding more capability who understand digital services and those related competencies.
That all sounds great, but what challenges does servitization bring?
Yeah, some of the challenges could be quite fundamental for companies. It doesn't mean that it will stop them from moving from product to services, but it needs to be acknowledged. For example, we can think about some internal and organizational challenges in terms of organizational culture in selling services. You know, most of these manufacturing companies have been selling products for years. Now they're moving to a new space of selling services, and then, as I mentioned, they need to have more people who understand relationship with the customers and understand how they can sell services. There are also some external challenges that some of these companies are facing. For example, there's a big threat from the big tech giants who can, like Amazon and Google, who can come and disrupt their operations because they can understand the customer better, they can analyze data better, and they can easily disrupt their operations. How they can work with these companies, big giants, how they can become partner with them is also a challenge. Another thing that I can think of is relating to understanding the risks associated with all these things, because you are basically becoming in charge of the entire ownership of the offering as a provider, and all the risks are under your shoulder. Understanding how you need to calculate the risks and how you can actually work around it is also a big challenge for manufacturing. So it's worth also mentioning that many people who talk about servitization, they refer to it as mainly as from the technological perspective, and they think the technology is an issue. But our research, our collaboration with companies actually says something quite different, which is most of the challenges are soft challenges, people, organizational challenges.
I was going to say, I mean, humans, people like you and I, we get used to doing things, don't we?
Yeah.
And we almost have an inbuilt resistance to change.
Absolutely.
I guess that's going to be one of the biggest challenges.
It is. Perhaps it's the single most challenging thing for most of the companies, the tension between product-focused teams and service-focused teams in organizations. The tension between them are huge. And it's worth mentioning that servitization kind of tackles the established boundaries of organization that they've had in place for many, many years. And that tackling of the established boundaries brings a lot of other difficulties and challenges bubble up. But I should mention that these challenges, I've seen so many companies that address these challenges in the most effective way and make their ways towards becoming an advanced services provider. So yes, it is challenging. but it's certainly something that's doable.
Overall, it sounds like you're telling me that servitization is going to bring a huge change in the type of productivity. So before you were just making lots of products, now you're adding lots of services to those products in a way which doesn't necessarily bring bigger revenues, but it continues the revenues and gives them more sustainability.
Absolutely.
So productivity is growing in a different way.
Absolutely. I believe that servitization could be a big drive of productivity. I mean, as I mentioned, using digital technologies to better understand how your customers are actually using your products allows you to do a lot of planning ahead, lots of logistical plannings in terms of resource management type of thing, allocation, distribution. So you are more equipped with understanding of the likelihood of something that might happen to your product, so you can plan everything in advance. That definitely raises the productivity, because you can get a lot of more outputs with the same input that you actually put in place. There was a study in 2018 from about 230 companies, and they were showing that firms gain around 33% in productivity after providing performance advisory, and that confirms that it is a drive for productivity around the world.
I guess in the Western world, some of our products, because of our wage levels, etc., and standards of living, some of our products, with all those costs on top, are costing quite a lot to produce. Whereas in developing countries, Eastern Europe perhaps, in Asia, the products themselves are being produced more cheaply. So the Western world has to not only produce the products, which might be more expensive, but they have to add something to them. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, in a way, because to be fair, those manufacturers in the Western world, they need to do more for their customers, and as you're saying, they need to compete with those companies and manufacturing companies from the low-cost economies. By adding services to their offerings, they are now able to provide their offerings to a wider range of customers and consumers, and also they open up lots of new opportunities for themselves to be able to actually offer more and create more value and capture more value for themselves in a way.
We're talking a lot about businesses and what it means for them and their workforces. But what about consumers? How do they benefit? Give me some wider examples in society of how the consumer is benefiting from servitization.
You're right. I mean, the idea of servitization started in the business-to-business context, B2B context. But we've seen more and more examples in the business and consumer. And then it's not just example, it's the societal appetite towards outcome and outputs rather than what products we're using. We are all getting more interested in getting from A to B in the most convenient, cheapest and efficient way. And these are the Ubers of examples of the world. So we are getting more interested in, let's say, having a clean home rather than what Hoover we're using, or clean dishes rather than what dishwasher we're using. Some of these might be hypothetical, but I've seen lots of more and more appetite from the consumer's perspective. And also, I need to mention that, for example, the government has set aside some of the grand challenges that we are facing in the society, being, for example, aging society, clean growth, and future mobility. And I believe that servitization advanced services could be an answer to these grand challenges. If I want to give you an example, in the consumer market, we're working with a company who is a manufacturer providing assisted living technologies for elderly people. They're trying to keep elderly people in their own homes independently as long as possible.
How does that work then? How can servitization help that?
Yeah, so this company is a fascinating example. There's this report that's saying that if an elderly person fall down in their homes, they need to visit A&E, and all the operations involved in that cost about £6,000 or £7,000 per day per patient. So what these companies, specific company is trying to do is to provide lots of different digital technologies, sensors, cameras, wristbands at their homes, and they're gathering lots of data about all the patterns of movements around the homes, and they're trying to actually give advice on the likelihood of someone's falling down in the next 24 hours or 48 hours. So they are becoming more proactive rather than being reactive, because if someone is on the floor and they had to call the ambulance, it's already too late. They want to avoid that by being proactive and giving this kind of like alarm to the people at homes. So we've seen a lot of more of these examples coming to play. Another example that we're working, for example, is to move away from this understanding of what, for example, boiler that I need to buy for a home, to this idea of purchasing or getting comfort as a service or heat as a service. Some of them might sound very hypothetical, but most of these companies are actually moving towards that direction.
So, I mean, I want to pin you down on that, Ali. I mean, how might that work? So, for instance, if I'm thinking about a boiler, everyone who owns a house is thinking about a boiler at some point.
Yeah.
What might I buy instead? What might I be offered instead to keep me warm?
It is, it's interesting. I mean, it's very difficult. If imagine that your boiler is broken, you don't know who to call, whether it's part of the warranty, what model do you need to use, the measurements, all sort of the problems that comes with it. Ultimately, you don't really care about what boiler you use.
No.
All you care is having a comfort.
Keeping warm.
Exactly. So most of the boilers manufacturers, and specifically one of the companies that we are working with, they are moving towards providing heat as a service. It's not easy because they need to work with lots of different players and actors in their wider supply chain and value network, like housing associations or the people who are actually designing all the homes. They still provide the boilers one way or another, but they will charge you as you use the heat, for a better phrase, rather than you pay for the boiler and off you go. And if something happens, you have to be, you are in charge.
So you can imagine all sorts of scenarios there, can't you? I mean, it could be, I don't know, a row of houses. There's one giant boiler which serves all 10. And all they care about is getting their heat, so they're buying their heat.
Exactly.
And it's then the company's job to keep that one boiler going rather than 10 individual boilers going.
Yeah, and sometimes it is quite challenging for the companies because all these, as I mentioned, all the risks of if something happens to the boiler, that's on the shoulder of the provider. But they are trying to address it by the use of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, data analytics. All these different technologies are actually in place for them to be able to know the likelihood of something wrong that happens to the products. So they can act quickly and they can schedule all the maintenance. And all sorts of headaches that they might have.
And
they can plan it.
That service is their responsibility anyway, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If we're buying heat, then they've just got to make sure that all their boilers are working.
Exactly.
As opposed to just selling that product and leaving it with the customer.
Absolutely. So ultimately, in the not too distant future, I hope that I will see that people are paying for the outcome, which is you pay for a cube meter warmth or something like this, or you pay for the mobility.
I just want my bath every night.
Exactly. And all you care is that having a hot water and warm home.
Exactly.
And that's the way they're going for.
And maybe not as many engineers coming and scratching their heads.
Exactly.
When things go wrong.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, Ali, no, this has been really fascinating. Now, I want to bring it back to that word, because whether we like it or not, it's a difficult word to get your head around, servitization. It's one long word. But as you've explained, it's got a wide meaning and multiple applications. But summarise it for me. If people are thinking, I heard that podcast, it was about servitization, what are they going to be telling me it's about?
It is about moving away from what you use into what outcome you're going to get. And ultimately, all of us are interested in outcome, whether we're an individual person or a commercial business or a customer or consumer. All we care is the outcome rather than what we're using. There are loads of examples, as I mentioned, in this world. And
the journey, the bath, the food.
Exactly.
We want the service, don't we?
Exactly. And it's not far off in the consumer market at all, because it's getting very mature in the commercial market. But I hope to see more and more examples in the consumer market in the near future.
That's brilliant. Many thanks, Ali. Thanks for taking the time to speak to Aston Business. You've given us a great set of insights there on how the future of manufacturing could actually rely on servitization. This was the fourth in a series of 10 monthly podcasts from here at Aston Business School, where I'm interviewing some of the UK's top business academics. Our next podcast is due out on Tuesday, the 24th of March, and this one will be with Claire Howell, an expert in intellectual property at Aston Business School. It's not just business as usual. Why? Because Aston means business. Thanks for listening.